RWBY Chibi Season 2, Episode 15, Nurse Nora. Really enjoyed this episode. We had 2 skits instead of 3. Unfortunately, the episode was a bit smaller. It may have been the same length, it just felt shorter because there were only 2 skits instead of 3, but it was about, I think it was like 3 minutes and 18 seconds, so I think that is in the range of what they normally do. It normally seems like so much more, I guess, because there's, 3 skits instead of 2. But of course, with there being 2 instead of 3, definitely a lot of weight to what we got in both skits. I really loved them. Definitely like the second one more. I really love that, and of course with it being the second skit, I'll save it. But the first one, of course, we have our 2 sets of sisters. So we have the prim and proper demeanor of the Schnee family, and then we have the sort of rowdy side of the Rose / Xiaolong family. Mostly the Xiaolong side of things, with Yang being the crazier one. So I really loved how that played out, and we have, of course, Weiss doing her thing and trying to be, be perfect in the eyes of Winter, and Winter's, saying like, you have to do this right, you have to do that right. It was pretty fitting that they had this towards the end between the 2 of them, but it was funny because recently, I think actually it may have been about a month now, it's almost been a month, but we just had the Weiss character short for the upcoming Volume 5, and it just felt really interesting. I was like, oh, it's funny that they would have this where it's, Weiss going up against these 2 Grimm, which were super tiny too. They were like normal size chasing her. They were both like really small. We got to see the regular tiny one, and then of course the Ghost Grimm, which I know it has a real name, but I still just call it the Ghost Grimm. But yeah, she's getting chased by them, and Winter's like, you have to, fight back and you'll thank me someday. And I was like, oh, that's oddly fitting for it to have come so recently after, we got that character short, where that was like the whole point of that, was Winter training Weiss like, hey, I'm not always going to be here. It's obviously way more serious in that context, but it was just interesting. I was like, oh, they had that kind of, they kind of did that. I feel like maybe they had this idea where it's like, this is what we'll actually make, and it's like, why don't we kind of poke fun at that with the Chibi version and just throw it in there for, a couple of seconds with Weiss running from these tiny Grimm, and then she defeats them by sliding under a tree branch and snapping it back like it's Looney Tunes, and they get sent, flying away. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. That may have been a total coincidence. I just kind of doubt it because it's come so recently after, that character short. So I feel like that was the point of kind of having that, be like, hey, character short, Chibi version of the short where it's much funnier. But really enjoyed that. My favorite part about that was probably the tree thing. It was like, it's the perfect way to end it, where, we have RWBY and Yang, and they're doing all the silly stuff. They're fighting over the cereal, which we get, Pumpkin Pete cereal, and, they're fighting over that, and it was like, that's kind of cool. They're, they're going back and forth with the cereal, and then the chips thing comes in when RWBY, like, completely destroys the bag, and Yang sits down and basically just pulls a chip out of her butt, and then he still eats it. And so they're just eating, they're just, being silly, and it's like them just having fun with life versus Weiss and Winter being very serious, and Weiss, being happy from like the slightest little bit of, recognition, from her older sister. So it was kind of cool going through that. And then of course the way they ended with an apple hitting RWBY on the head, and then she kind of looks at her sister like sad. And of course Yang, her eyes even change color, and she punches through the tree, and it's like, cool, my big sister punched a tree for me because an apple dropped on my head, which, of course it makes no sense. And then they skip off and stuff, and it was just really funny to me. So I loved that. But then it went into the second skit, and that had me laughing like crazy. There were a couple of scenes in there that just made me really laugh. So I want more Nora. Now, I always do, because there's always something. I recently made a video that was based off of, it's kind of like my last review, I think this was the last episode with the whole cake thing. So I'm going to put a link in the description so you guys can check that out, or I'll probably, if I remember right, I'll just put the little annotation video thing at the end. But I made a silly video about her because they always give her really great background stuff. And I was so happy to see that she was in the foreground of this, because she's typically funny, funnier when she's doing something, because they go, without it being serious, they're allowed to make her as crazy as she can possibly get, because in the context of, the actual series, she still gets super crazy compared to other characters, but it's within the bounds of like, yeah, it's going to stop at this point because we're still telling this certain story. So as crazy as it'll get, it'll always have a cap. And with the Chibi version, that is not really the case. So she's allowed to do whatever and be super crazy, and they make it like, creepy comedy deal where she comes in because, somehow, Rain broke his leg. And it was just awesome the whole way through. And the first thing, it was already funny, like just the way they did it where it was supposed to be like creepy and she's looking all weird. But the first thing that really made me laugh was the thermometer jug, and like it was just so funny because she's like, first she's doing the stethoscope, and it's like, according to this, you're dead. And so that gave me a little bit of a laugh. And he's like, that goes in your chest. And then he's like, it's supposed to be my chest. And she freaks out on him. And then, she talks about the thermometer. So he's like, ah. And she's like, no, guess again. And the way they do it, where the thermometer rises all the way to the top, and they zoom in on Ren's eyes, and his eyes just get like super huge. It just made me laugh. And he like, flicks it out of her hand because he's freaking out. And I figured they were going to do this. I don't remember because I actually can't think of the actual scene, but it reminded me a lot of the scene from Misery, in which I thought that's what they were going for from the very beginning. And then it really sinks in when she actually jumps on the bed because she has this big hammer and she's standing at the foot of his bed. And all I could think of was Misery by Stephen King. And I was like, I don't know if they're going to make an exact reference to it. And I feel like they did with the dialogue. Because I just can't remember the exact scene, like all the dialogue from that scene. But I felt like she said something that was from the movie. Like half of one of her sentences was ripped straight from the movie, and then it changed into something else. But I was like, I feel like that was an exact line from the movie, and I think that was kind of the point there, was to reference Misery at the end. But that was a really funny one to me. Like I love that with creepy Nora and Ren, and I love the way they did it, because every once in a while they do something different with the animation, and this is definitely one of those moments when she jumps on the bed. It was just, it really wasn't the animation that was different. It was more the angles and how they, did it. Because normally it's just like a side profile. Like it almost could be 3D with how they normally do the chibi stuff. Because characters typically just go from, left to right. Maybe they jump up. But typically it's kind of like a left to right thing. It could technically be 2D if they wanted to, but 3D is cooler. But the way they did it was so cool to me, because they have like this, upward angle with Nora when she's standing on the bed, so she looks really big, and you see the background and stuff, and it's from a certain angle. And then when they cut to Ren, he's like backing up in his bed, and it's like following him as he's backing up, and it's just this specific angle we don't really see very often, and the type of movement he was doing, I thought was pretty cool. So I like that. It was just a little animation thing I noticed where. And like I said, it's hard to really call it animation because it was more the angles than anything else. But there was some stuff, of course, like with the way they did the eyes and stuff. It's something that we don't see too often, where it was like super extreme close-ups. But, excuse me, just really loved the way they did that. So that was super funny. And I think this may have been the first time we actually saw, excuse me, the specific transition they used with her, with the Notice Me sign. I don't think they ever used that before. And I feel like they've had her, I'm sure she's been in there before where she's like used her hammer as the transition. I'm pretty sure that's what it's been. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's, at least I don't remember if they used it. It was like somewhere in the last season. It certainly wasn't this season. But I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a new transition for her, because I'm quite certain we've seen other transitions from her in the past. So thought that was cool. Just a small new little thing, but really loved the second skit. It made me laugh like pretty much the whole way through, and just the thermometer thing was my favorite part without a doubt. Like I didn't expect them to like do the zoom in and like have him freak out like that. So it really made me laugh. And of course they like throw in the sound cue where it's like, bah! And so he just freaks out. So I thought that was a cool little addition there. But really fun episode. I really enjoyed this one. Good to see Winter. Of course they're kind of really utilizing her. So I think that's great. Since she's been introduced as like, hey, here's Winter. Boom, here's Winter again. So it's been pretty good. They've definitely been doing that a lot. So I love that. Looking forward to the next episode. I don't know what it is this time. I didn't randomly like see the thumbnail for it, because knowing I can't watch anything, the week it's put out, I prefer not to know what's gonna come next, because it's like, well, I gotta wait a week. I don't want to, look at it that way. But really cool episode. Really enjoyed this one. Was surprised because we have had like the 3 skit thing for a long time. That's almost become like their new staple, where it's like, here's 3 skits, and the middle one's always the shortest. That's just how it's been, and every once in a while, they break the formula for that. And this was definitely a good break. I like the longer skits. I always do. That was one of my favorite things when this season started up. I felt like they do a great balance of that, where it's always 2 long skits, and then the middle one's typically the shortest one. And this was just like, well, let's just make 2 skits instead of a quick short one. So it's always great. I think the longer skits always serve the comedy much better than the shorter ones. So really had a good time with this, of course. We'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, at least favorite parts about it. And I would love to know if you could get any two characters paired up with one taking care of the other, which 2 characters would you guys have? Because I think it would be pretty fun to see how they would do that. If I doubt it'll happen where they switch the characters. It's always fun to look at situations in the chibi version of the show and be like, I wonder what these two sets of characters would do in that situation. But for this, especially with what they showed, I would love to see what would happen if RWBY was sick and Yang was taking care of her or something like that. It would make way more sense than Nora. Like with Nora, it perfectly fits her character, so it would still be crazier for anyone else to do it. Like, and for her, it's just like, it's crazy, but it's Nora crazy, so it works. With anyone else, it would be like too crazy for their normal version anyway. But we'd love to know what two characters you guys would like to see, and how you guys even think that interaction would probably play out if one character is sick and someone else was taking care of them. If they did like junior detectives and one of them got sick and the other had to, I think either way that could actually work out, and it's really funny because basically they just make them do really silly, stupid stuff when it's the two of them doing junior detectives. So if for whatever reason they were doing junior detectives, but one of them was sick, I think Sun and Neptune, both versions of that would probably be really funny, at least to me, because every time they do junior detectives, it's like the funniest stuff to me. But we'd love to know which pairings, random pairings you guys would like to see. And of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.